As long as there has been violence or world-altering events, there has been trauma. However, post-traumatic stress disorder is a relatively new diagnosis. So how do we get the term PTSD? Now, we're not going to cover the entire history of trauma, violence, and war because a few millennia of people fighting each other gets a little tedious. And also, we're going to skip to the 1900s because that's when people started taking notes that we actually care about. Sorry, Apesialists, your madness and trauma during the Marathon Wars will be forgotten by the end of the video. Just so we cover this, though, there are mentions of war-based panic noted in Shakespeare, the Bible, and other historically notable works spanning the interim to present day. If you want to see a modern example of trauma, feel free to look at TikTok or X. Moving on. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, war-based fear and trauma were thought to have only occurred during battle. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, this is where we start to see a connection made from war-based trauma to trauma caused by physical experiences, such as pain, particularly railroads and factories, which this is also when we find a connection to the brain and emotions, courtesy of Phineas Gage. Now, it is important to note that at the same time, women were expected to be homemakers and in general had less autonomy. With this lack of autonomy and independence came a higher rate of domestic violence and the psychological problems that we now know come with that. However, back then, the whole of these symptoms were classified under hysteria. Now, those of you familiar with etymology might see where this is going. Medically speaking, the suffix ia means condition of, and the prefix hyster means uterus. As a quick side note, this is also where certain toys were invented as a medical device as an attempt to help try and cure female hysteria, so ladies, at least you got something out of it. Back to the main point though, hysteria was attributed to women exclusively until the end of World War I, where men coming back from war were displaying the same symptoms, and given the environmental features of World War I, utilizing trench warfare and bombshells, the men were diagnosed with shell shock. This diagnostic term persisted until the onset and end of World War II, which was traumatic for so many reasons. However, the collective reasoning was that the name shell shock should be changed to battle fatigue, since trench warfare was OUT out, and long deployments were the new hotness. Now, in the background during these wars, there have been general psychological experiments done behind the scenes and the government trying to track idiocy and insanity in the census data. No joke, that's a thing that happened. But hey, we eventually get to the creation of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders by the APA in 1952. The DSM then labeled PTSD as we know it as gross stress reaction, mainly attributing these symptoms to natural disasters and war. At this point, trauma was still attributed to only massive events that affected large numbers of people. However, these researchers found that people were also having these trauma responses as a result of emotional experiences in addition to situational and violent stressors. We didn't get the formal name post-traumatic stress disorder until the DSM-3 in 1980, which, as another sidebar, the fact that 71 years has passed and we have only gotten 5.5 editions of this book seems a little odd. However, now with the creation of post-traumatic stress disorder, this allowed for the integration for both men and women to obtain the same diagnosis by looking at the symptoms, not the circumstances or gender. This did not help with the accompanying stigma, but that is a topic for another time. Now, jumping to present day in 2023, the diagnosis of PTSD really hasn't changed much aside from some of the diagnostic criteria, but there has been talk about adding complex PTSD as a formal diagnosis in the DSM-6, which would allow for the differentiation between singular instance events and chronic abuse or trauma. Now, should that addition or differentiation be made, I'll leave that for y'all to discuss in the comments below. And if you've gotten this far and you've enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe because it does help the channel out substantially. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching and we'll learn something new in the next video.